I just love your church here. This is the second time in the last few years I've been here, and I just love it. Thank you. And if this is the first time you've ever been in this room, or maybe to one of these sorts of events, please feel very much at home. Feel very welcome. I tell you, I have been traveling about the last few years. I've been traveling all over the world, and I've met a lot of people, and I think I'd have to say that the more people that I meet, the more I doubt that God sees us isolated one from another in little countries or even religious groups. The Bible calls God shepherd, and I know that the shepherd just sees us all as one big flock. And that's how we're going to remain here today. Okay? How's that sound? Good. That's nice. You probably saw on some of the flyers or things like that, you probably saw that what we're going to be looking at today is a question. We're looking at what is it that connects prayer with healing. Prayer with healing. And I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about a person that has helped me to understand a lot about the answer to that question. You heard in the introduction those two words, Christian Science. Christian Science. The person who started all of Christian Science was a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. If you have a friend maybe who brought you here to this lecture today, maybe he or she has told you about Mary Baker Eddy or the Christian Science Church. She is an extraordinary person, and she did so much for the world in helping them all to answer that question. What is it that connects prayer with healing? I'll tell you about a family that went to go hear her speak one time. It was a long trip for this family. It was, first of all, it was a mother, her son, and her little girl. They lived in Kansas City, and they traveled all the way to New Hampshire by train to go hear Mary Baker Eddy speak. And it was a tough trip for them because the little girl had a tough time. She had this sore, this boil on her head that was really so painful that the poor girl, she wouldn't let her mom touch her. She wouldn't let her mother wash her hair, comb it. This talk was the day after Independence Day, so it was very hot. And the mom had brought a little straw hat for her daughter, but the daughter wouldn't let her put it on. It just hurt too much. Well, they went to hear Mary Baker Eddy speak. It was outside, and Mary Baker Eddy spoke off of a balcony at her house to a group that was out there on the grass. And when she was finished, she came downstairs and sat down on a chair with some other people on the porch, and some of the people in the audience walked up, and they were in line just to say thank you. You could picture that. Well, when that little family got to where Mary Baker Eddy was, they didn't have time to say anything to one another. They just smiled. And then somebody in line said, "Okay, move along." The mother wrote about this experience later. She said, "I wish I could make the world know what I saw when Mary Baker Eddy looked at my children." She said, "There was this love. It was like the light. It was just everywhere." And the mother was just so overtaken by this. She walked away from the crowd, out into the trees, and she kept thinking about this. It just was so striking to her. She said, this love, she looked out and she saw it there, just pouring out on the grass, pouring on the trees. She looked at the crowd, it was just pouring out on them. She said it was an intelligent presence. Then she started to cry. She asked, "Why haven't I known you before? Why haven't I known you always?" Boy, you could just picture that. This experience had such an effect on the woman Well, a few hours later, she looked at her daughter's head, and she said the boil was gone. Her head was just as flat as the back of her hand. She'd been healed. And that must have been a good day for that little girl, especially a good day for that mom. I mean, think about that. That was when she was really introduced to a love that has the effect of healing. Now, you and I, everyone here in this room, we've all loved someone. We know what that feels like to love somebody. Mary Baker Eddy, however, she must have been drawing on something more than just a human emotion to help that little girl. Now, that little something more is really what we're going to be talking about today. I would have to say that God as love is something that is much more prominent in the world today. In the last few years, you can tell that people are thinking about God as love more. You know, I read the Bible. I love the Bible, and probably many of you do too. I'd have to say that, to me, the most significant sentence in the entire book is just 3 words. It's that God is love. God is more than just loving. God is ever-present, all-powerful love itself. This love, the Bible shows, is truly the only power, the only presence. It's what connects us all. It's what envelops us all. In every moment, there is love. There is God. In fact, I believe that a moment without feeling the love of God is a wasted moment. The love of God truly is the big picture. Now, wouldn't you say that, you see it a lot here in California, a lot of people today are thinking about God as love beyond just a religious thing or a Sunday thing or a Bible thing. They're thinking about God as love, really as something tangible every day of the week. Are very many of you here familiar with a book that was published a couple years ago now? This book was written by a Harvard neurosurgeon. His name's Dr. Eben Alexander, and he wrote a book called Proof of Heaven. Have very many of you here ever heard of that book? My goodness, a lot of you have. The rest of you are going to probably get that book. It's a very interesting book. This man, he taught and served at Harvard Medical School and some other places too. Very well respected. And you'd think that his book would be about neurosurgery, but it's not. What happened was he became so ill that, he was in a coma for 8 or 9 days. The people working on him were his fellow neurosurgeons. And it was that experience in which he was introduced to this intelligent presence that is divine love. Now, his fellow neurosurgeons told him later there were times where there was no brain activity going on at all. They couldn't find any. And you'd think if that's what was going on, he wouldn't have much to write about in his book. But no, it's a really significant book. It's an interesting book, kind of graphic. He talks graphically about what he went through. But he comes to some remarkable conclusions. I've got them on a little card here. I've got one. Listen to this one. Here he is. This book he's written, number 1 on the bestseller list, and now he's quit his job. All he does is travel around to talk about his experience. Here's his conclusion. After all of that, coming out of his coma, he says, love is without a doubt the basis of everything. Not some abstract, hard to fathom kind of love, but the day-to-day kind that everyone knows. The kind of love we feel when we look at our spouse and children, or even our animals. In its purest and most powerful form, this love It's not jealous or selfish, but unconditional. This is the reality of realities, the incomprehensibly glorious truth of truths that lives and breathes at the core of everything that exists or that ever will exist. And no remotely accurate understanding of who and what we are can be achieved by anyone who does not know it and embody it in all of their actions. My goodness, what a conclusion this man came to. He says, love is without a doubt the basis of everything. I tell you folks, I think that's what I'm here to learn. I think that's what I'm here to. If I get that one message, I think I'm getting somewhere. Love, the love that is God, it's the basis of everything. It certainly changed that man's life. Look what it did for that little girl. Yes, God is love. And it is something that we need to not just know about, but we need to feel it. It's so interesting how the feel of God's love touches you. You notice with that little girl, that family, the mom, it only took a moment, just took a moment for everything in their lives to change. That's exactly how it works. When the love of God touches you, it may only be for a moment, but from that point forward, everything's different. Everything's different. Mary Baker Eddy, the woman I was telling you about, she wrote a book, and in her book, she talks about that moment. Let me show you this book. Here's a copy of it right here. It's called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And again, your friend who invited you here might have told you about this book, Science and Health. Here's a little excerpt from it about that moment. She says, become conscious for a single moment that life and intelligence are purely spiritual, neither in nor of matter, and the body will then utter no complaints. If suffering from a belief in sickness, you'll find yourself suddenly well. Sorrow is turned into joy when the body is controlled by spiritual life, truth, and love. Hence, the hope of the promise Jesus bestows, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also, because I go unto my Father. Because the ego is absent from the body and present with truth and love. Now, in this book, Mary Baker Eddy, she uses words like truth and love actually as names for God. She capitalizes them. Now, that idea of God as love, clearly it's got a biblical basis. Truth, too. So when she's referring to truth and love, she's talking not about some ancient idea, some old conception of God. No, she's talking about a tangible presence. In fact, it's the basis of everything. It's not like she's talking about two gods, a truth God and a love God. No, she uses both those names for this one presence. You and I, we each have more than one name, but it represents one person. That's how it is for God. Now, basic to our work here today, there is something that Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health. It's very helpful. It's really kind of the foundation of everything we're going to do today. She's speaking of Jesus, and she says, first, in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. The healing power of truth and love. That was the first thing he had for his followers. First in the list of Christian duties, he taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. Now, if he walked in the door right here and came into this room, met all of us for the first time, initially that's what he would teach us too. The healing power of truth and love. I'll tell you how this works. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was in an accident. I fell from a height of about 10 feet, landed on my back. When I got up, I could still walk around, but I was really hurting. And from what you've heard so far, you can guess that when I'm in trouble like that, I'm going to be somebody who prays about it. And I did. I just started praying. And I prayed awful hard. I looked to the truth that is God. I turned to the Bible. And as I was reading the Bible, something right at the beginning of the Bible, initially, the Bible talks about how God makes us in his likeness. And I was very interested in that. And I really allowed myself to connect with it. I knew that I was making progress over the next couple of days. The reason I knew I was making progress is because my thought was changing. My perspective was changing as a result of really connecting with this truth. The truth that I am made in God's likeness. You know, the reason I knew I was making progress, even though I wasn't hurting any less, was because of this one fact. You see, God answers our prayers, certainly, but God answers our prayers by changing thought. That's how God does it. I know when I first started praying, I wanted God to change my leg or my school teacher, my bank account, something like that. Turns out, no. God answers your prayer by changing thoughts, so that's what you watch. That's what you track. And so for the next 2 or 3 days, that's what I really did. And the leading idea that was transforming my thought was this fact that I'm made in God's likeness. I really liked it. Well, about 3 days later, I had to get on a plane, travel all the way to Massachusetts, do some work there. And I got there on a Saturday. I went early because my brother-in-law lived right in that area at that time. And one thing he really likes doing, he loves to play golf. That's something he really likes to do, is play golf. And he had arranged for us to go play at a very nice course. You know when your friend gets you on a good course like that? Well, I remember as we drove up to the golf course and parked, he looked over at me. You see, I hadn't told him I was hurting. But he said to me, he goes, "Mark, before we tee off, let's go hit a bucket of balls on the driving range." And I thought, oh my goodness, okay. And I picked up my bag, I carried it over to the driving range, and they gave me a little bucket of balls. I was standing on a big square of artificial turf, and I poured the golf balls out onto the turf. And what I would do was I would just take the end of my golf club, roll the ball into the center of the turf, and I worked hard. You can picture it. I'm working hard to hit the ball straight and to pray. I'm just praying along. You know, as I'm hitting golf balls there, and I'm just hurting, I'm praying, and it struck me. You know, again, remember, basic to our work here today is the fact that first in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. Well, I noticed as I'm standing there, I thought, you know, for the last 3 days, I have been doing the truth part wonderfully. I've really been doing that truth part. Great. But I'd left out the love part. It's the healing power of truth and love. And it struck me. I thought, I've turned to God as love so many times. Why in the world would I leave it out this time? Well, I stopped. I stopped hitting golf balls. And I said, okay, I'm making a change right now. I'm going to become conscious of the presence of God as love. I've done that so many times, and as soon as I did so, I felt it. In the Bible it says, my presence shall go with thee. So I knew that wherever I went, I'm in the presence of God as love. And as soon as I opened my thought to it, it just covered me. I felt it. Then in that love, standing there on the driving range, in that love, God said to me, he said, with such love, he says, Mark, be aware of this. Be aware of this, Mark. Neither God nor God's likeness was ever in an accident. I was so surprised by that. I didn't expect God to say that. But I could feel God's love along with the message, so I knew it was genuine. And all of a sudden it made such sense. Well, of course not. God, or the likeness of God, completely spiritual. never would be impacted by matter. Of course not. Well, there it was, the healing power of truth and love. Now, I mentioned that often when the love of God touches your thought like that, it just takes a moment. Just takes a moment. And it did. It just changed me. I went, oh, that's so good. Of course not. Thank you, God. Then, in the time it took to roll a golf ball into the center of the driving mat, into that artificial turf, and hit it away, in that moment I was completely fine, completely free. And it's remained that way since. Completely healed. What a good lesson. It only takes a moment. You've all had that experience. You ever have a moment that changes your life? You ever know somebody, acquainted with somebody who you don't really like too much? Whenever you're around this person, you feel a bit tense. Can't wait to get away, that kind of thing. Then maybe you do a project together, or maybe you're at somebody's house together and you talk, something like that, and then all of the history goes away, your friends, that kind of thing. My daughter was telling me about something like that not too long ago. She works as a ballerina. That's her job. And, you've probably all seen the ballet on TV, or maybe you've been to some performances yourself. Those ballerinas on stage, they just look so beautiful in their tutus. Let me tell you, in a typical production, there may be a lot of ballerinas in a company, but usually only one or two can have lead parts. So many of these beautiful, cute little ballerinas, many of them will kill their grandmother for a part. Well, there was one particular woman in my daughter's company, and I'd hear about her pretty often. My daughter and this woman hardly ever got along. They just battle it out. And my daughter would tell me about how this other woman was just undermining her, and they'd just fight. They didn't like each other at all. I'd hear about it. Well, a few weeks ago, my daughter told me about what happened. Interesting thing. My daughter was in a studio doing a rehearsal for an upcoming production, and as she finished, she walked out the door out into the hall, and that other ballerina was right there. My daughter had a frown on her face, and the other girl asked her, "What's wrong?" And she held up one of her point shoes. You've seen those ballerina point shoes. She said, "Oh, these new shoes, they just don't fit. I can't turn in them very well." Well, the other woman reached in her bag and took out a brand new pair and said, we wear the same size. Why don't you try these? Maybe they'll work better. Now, that other ballerina, she wasn't planning on doing that. That was something very spontaneous, and it just took a moment for her to hand those shoes to her. My daughter tried them on, and in fact, they did work. She called me 2 or 3 days after that, and she said, "Dad, it's terrible. We're good friends now." Just a moment of unself-love erased a whole history of animosity and even hatred. And it was all gone, and then she called me, they were having dinner together. It's nice. Yes, that's how it works. This healing power that is God, it only takes a moment to touch your thought. But you see, your thought embraces everything you experience. So when you allow your thought to yield to the presence of truth and love, you're connecting prayer with actual healing, big transformations. Now, the Bible says something interesting that will kind of help us to really get a handle on this. The Bible says that we are to serve in the newness of spirit and not the oldness of the letter. The newness of spirit, not the oldness of the letter. You could say the letter is the words you might read in the Bible, or maybe even in this book, Science and Health, or other books you just love. Those words, you could tell from hearing me talk, I love the letter. I love those words. I'm in those books every single day. I eat them up. But I would never be satisfied with knowing just the words. Just the words. No, I would never be satisfied with that. I want to know the spirit behind the words. See, we're talking today about the healing power of truth and love. The truth you could equate with the words. Love is like the spirit behind them. Yes, we serve in the newness of spirit, not just in the oldness of the letter. Do you ever do this? You know when somebody does something for you, something nice, pick up a pencil for you or something like that, you might say to him or her, well, thank you. Then there are times where someone does something very nice for you, and in that case, you might say to the other person, oh, thank you. Now, in both cases, you used the same letters, the same words, thank you. In the first case, it was just words. But in the second case, you actually felt the spirit of gratitude. That's the difference between just the letter and the spirit. And you want the spirit. You want to feel it. Remember as I'm standing there on that driving range praying along? I was connecting well with the letter. This idea that I'm God's likeness. But then in such love, God told me that God's likeness never was in an accident. See, the love of God gave the letter authority. Authority in my thought. And that is exactly where it was needed. Let's do a little exercise. I want to really connect with this. You heard in the introduction that I'm from New Mexico. Have very many of you here ever been there to New Mexico? Wow, that many. Just on the way to someplace, I'll bet. Well, you might have gone to Santa Fe or something. I don't know. Well, do this. I want you to imagine something. But before you do that, I want to ask you a question. Some of you might be praying for yourself, something that's very important, or you might be praying for someone else. Today, let me ask you, instead of just hearing me talk about the healing power of truth and love, how would it be if you actually, here and now today, you actually experienced it? Now, in this lecture, actually experienced it. Would that be okay? You don't have to get up or anything like that. You can stay seated, but would that'd be cool? All right, to get the next step, let's go do a little exercise. I'm going to need your imagination here. Where I live in New Mexico, it's not like Arizona. It's not just desert. There are places, both in Arizona and a lot in New Mexico, where there are high mountains. And I live in an area where we're in the mountains. There's cactus there too, but there's fir trees. In the winter, it can be very cold. I want you to imagine this, and it's going to take your imagination because you're warm in here. Imagine being at my house, coming to visit in the middle of the winter, okay? Picture this. It's very cold outside, and when it's time for bed, I take you to your room, put you to bed. You look out the window, and you see that there's snow falling. And you sleep well, get up early that next morning. You look out that same window, and you see all the clouds are gone. The storm's over with. In fact, the sky is as blue as that lady's jacket right over there. Bluer than you ever saw. So you get up, you walk outside. Now, the temperature and the atmosphere is a little bit different in New Mexico than it is here in California. You know, up in the Sierra Mountains, there's a whole lot more water in the air than there is in New Mexico. So when it snows, the snow is very, very light. You can't hardly make a snowball out of it. It's just so fluffy and light. And as you open the door to walk outside, imagine all of this, you step out into it and you can't even hardly feel it on your feet. So beautiful and so quiet. Picture that. You know, there isn't any wind, but you see some of the snow fall off of the branch of one of the trees. The sun is behind it. And so that snow in the sunshine, it acts like a prism. And you see the white snow, but also red and yellow and green in the snow as it falls. You ever see that before? It's very pretty. Next thing you do, you close your eyes, face the sunshine, and immediately you feel warm on your face. The longer you face the sun, the warmer you feel. You all imagine that? Yep. It's good. You just have kind of connected with the idea, the spirit of sunshine. You felt warm on your face. Sunshine. Now I'm going to describe sunshine to you in a different way. I got to read this part. You'll see why. This is the letter describing sunshine. It's an ongoing atomic process where the sun is generating energy by the nuclear fusion of hydrogen nuclei into helium. In its core, the sun fuses 620 million metric tons of hydrogen each second. Photons are electromagnetic byproducts of this nuclear fusion, and some of them travel towards the Earth at more than 186,000 miles per second. All right, what I just read to you, that's the letter describing sunshine. We need the letter. If we don't know the speed of light, not even our cell phones work. You need the letter and the spirit. Now, it's interesting. When I read to you that description of sunshine, the letter, hydrogen nuclei, when I read all about that, I doubt very many of you here felt warm on your face, did you? You didn't. No, you need the letter and the spirit. All right, let's do another exercise. This time, though, you're not going to need your imagination. I know that every single one of you here in this room, every one of you at some point have been told, or maybe you've said it to someone else, that God loves you. I know you've heard that before, that God loves you. Now, I tell you, as I travel around, I see it all the time. I hear people say that. That phrase, God loves you, is most often left in the letter category. Very rarely do people actually take time to acknowledge and feel the love of God. God loves you. My goodness. All right, here's what we're going to do. For our next exercise, I want to start by just acknowledging the presence of God right here, okay? As I mentioned, in the Bible it says, my presence shall go with thee. So God's right here. Now, the next step, what I want you to do is bask in that presence that is God and allow God to love you. Allow God to love you. I remember the first time I ever tried that. I was a little boy. I remember it. I remember stepping forward into the love of God. And in a moment or two, just 2 or 3 seconds, I withdrew. I remember saying to God, I said, oh God, don't waste it on me. It's not like I don't deserve it. I don't know, it just felt kind of selfish or something. That's not what we're going to do here today. God loves you. I saw a bumper sticker. It was here in California a few months ago. It was funny. I was in traffic. And the bumper sticker said, God loves you. And I'm trying hard too. Have you seen that one? It was funny. All right, so what we're going to do, our first step is to acknowledge the presence of this one we love so much, of God. Then let God love you. Don't be embarrassed to do this, okay? Don't be embarrassed to do it. Let God just love you. Why not? This is a good time to do it. All right, we got our first step. Acknowledge God's presence. The second step is to let God love you. I'll do it right along with you. Here we go. That's so good. Exactly right. All right, now we're going to do the next step. We're going to start the same way. Acknowledge God's presence. Let God just love you. You ever see somebody pour water out of a pitcher into a glass? You've seen that before. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to allow God to love you, just to pour it on. It says in the Bible and lots of other places that God is infinite love. Infinite. So you can't waste that love. Don't worry. I want you to do this. I want you to let God love you and just fill you with his love. And then let it just overflow out into everyone else in this room. Okay? All right, so we got 3 steps this time. Acknowledge God's presence. Let God love you. Let it overflow into everyone else right here in this room, okay? Here we go. It's nice how fast it just overflows into everyone. I love it. You know, that's a good habit to get into. Just to let God love you like that and then just feel it overflow into everyone else in the room. Try this. Next time you're at the grocery store, you're at Ralph's or something like that, maybe if you're at Walmart, do this. You know when you pull your cart up sometimes, especially at Walmart, you can tell I'm from New Mexico, you know how the line's long and you can't believe how long it is. That's a good time to do it. Just let God love you right there in line. Let God love you and then acknowledge that love overflowing right out of you into everyone else in Walmart. If you try it, do it once, and I promise you, your Walmart will never be the same. Just try that. Ralph's or wherever you want to do it. It is important to do that. Now, it's easy to behold the love of God for others. But you notice that you just let God love you first, and then let that love just overflow. You know, when you look in the Bible, how Jesus was really stepping forward into the beginning of his career, it's interesting. He was being baptized by John the Baptist. He hadn't done anything yet. Jesus was there. There were a lot of other people being baptized and watching too. Well, that was when Jesus heard out loud God say, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Now that must have been a good day for Jesus, don't you think? To hear that out loud. I mean, picture, if you were walking to your car after this lecture and you hear out loud, "This is my beloved son or daughter, in whom I'm well pleased," you would feel very loved, wouldn't you? Well, Jesus knew he was our example. And so that love that God had for him, God has for you and me too, today, here and now. The timing of that message is so interesting for Jesus. As I said, he hadn't done anything yet. So God didn't love him that way because of what he'd accomplished, because of what he'd done. God loved him that way simply because of who he was. And that's how God loves you. God loves you so much simply because of who you are. You're the only one of you he has, so you're very important. And that's why there is such love for you. All right, let's keep going with our little exercise. We're now at the final step. We're going to start the same way. We're going to acknowledge God's presence. We're going to let God love us. We're not just doing words, "God loves me." We're not just going to say those words. No, we're going to open up to the spirit of it and feel that love. Okay? We're going to then let that love overflow. All right, here comes the final step. In that tender, holy, all-powerful love, be still and allow God than to tell you something wonderful about yourself. Okay? Start the same way. Acknowledge God's presence. Let God love you. Let it overflow. And then be open. It's okay. Be open. Allow God to tell you something wonderful about yourself right now. I'll do it too. Okay, good. Now what you just heard, really, it's a secret between you and God. Jesus talks about that. He says, enter into your closet in prayer like that, and what God gives you in secret, you keep it there, right in your heart. Jesus did that all the time. The Bible refers to that as the secret place of the Most High. Now, probably many of you heard something about yourself that was maybe unexpected, maybe a bit surprising. If you haven't yet heard anything, just continue today to bask in God's love until you hear that message. It often is not so expected, but you see, remember, basic to our work today. First in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. Now, here's what you all just did. You allowed the love of God to embrace you and fill you. And in that love, what happened? You asked God about yourself. And what did you hear? Truth. There it is. The healing power of truth and love. Love and truth. You didn't just have the letter. You felt the spirit of love. Now the letter, the words you heard, the idea, the feeling you had about yourself, that has the authority of God behind it. Love God enough. Be grateful enough to allow what God told you just now to become permanently what you think. Make it your permanent attitude, your whole outlook. That's how Jesus did it. He was about his Father's business. Now, I'll give you another example of how this healing power of truth and love operates. I have a friend who, when she was a little girl, in the summertime, she was over at her friend's house. They were swimming, and it was dinner time, so it was time for her to get on her bike and ride home. So as she's riding home for dinner, she has her towel on her handlebars. One edge of the towel slipped down into the spokes of her front wheel, stopped the wheel, and she went right over the falls, hit her face and head on the pavement there of her street. That wasn't too far from where she lived, and some of her neighbors saw what had happened and helped to get the little girl home. Now, this little girl's parents had all their lives turned to this healing power of truth and love for healing. They didn't just have some blind faith that God, maybe in his wisdom, would somehow touch the daughter's life. No, they had made a habit of going to the truth that is love in order not to just have a blind faith in God, but to understand what God has to say. And you just experienced it, so you know just what I'm talking about. Well, her father, the next couple of days, her father went to work, but her mother stayed home with her. And the mother turned right to the Bible, the truth in the Bible. For the next 3 days, they looked together at ideas in the Bible, and this little girl, she told me how what really struck her as her mother read to her, what really struck her was that same thing that I had mentioned to you right at the beginning, that idea that each of us are made as the likenesses of God. She said that idea just really struck her. You see, her mother had to read to her. One of her eyes was swollen shut, and she was cut there on the side, and so it was tough. Her mother was taking very good care of her, but she was the one who had to read to the little girl. In fact, she didn't want her daughter to be shocked by what she looked like, so the mother took some sheets and put them over most of the mirrors in the house. Didn't want her little girl to be shocked. I know the details about this because that little girl now is my wife. Well, about the third day, that little girl peeked behind one of the sheets to look at herself in the mirror. And you know what? She was shocked. She was very shocked. Remember, the main idea, the truth that had really been connecting with her was this fact that she's God's likeness. And so when she looked at the image, looking back at her in the mirror, she was shocked. She says, that's not me. That's not me. I'm God's likeness. That's not me. Remember, first in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. For 3 days, she and her mom had definitely connected well with the truth. At that moment, as she's looking in the mirror, that's when the love part happened. You know what it is. You see, this little girl, she was one of those kinds of kids who, she always tried hard to be good. You know those kind? She always was working very hard to be good, to be a good girl. In fact, I know she probably was feeling kind of guilty at making her parents so worried about her, maybe her neighbors too. Well, there as she looked in the mirror, she said she felt that incredible love of God just fill her, just like we've been doing. She said it just filled her. And then in that holy, tender, all-powerful love, God said to her, God said, you don't have to try so hard to be a good girl anymore. You don't have to do that anymore. No, you're my likeness. You're already good. In fact, as my likeness, you're perfect. Now, again, that message only took a moment, but it changed that little girl's perspective permanently, I know. From that point forward, she knew that she represented God. She's God's likeness. And what a holy, beautiful thing, God to tell her in such love, Renee, you don't have to try and be so good anymore. Don't do that. No, you're already good because you're my likeness. You're perfect. As she felt that and heard that truth, in that moment, her eye opened. By the next day, middle of the day, she was out playing with her friends. Her face and head is completely clean and clear. There it is again. That healing power of truth and love. Where did it operate? In her thought. As her thought yielded to the presence of God as love, it changed everything. She connected prayer now with healing. It's so good how that works. Now, you've been hearing me talk for a while about this wonderful presence that is God. You have not just heard words about it, you've actually felt the presence of God, this presence of infinite love. Let me ask you a question. If God is so powerful, in such authority, truly the basis of everything, why is it that occasionally we may feel so afraid or angry, maybe victimized that, I don't know, we just want to go out in the garden and eat worms? Why is that? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's because we stop making a point to feel that tangible love God has for us. We stop being intentional about it like we were just a few moments ago. It's that important. We need to make a point to feel God's love for us. Now, you can tell that this presence that is love, being the basis of everything, it's that important to be in touch with it constantly. As I said a little while ago, a moment in which you don't feel the love of God is kind of a wasted moment. It's important to feel that love of God. I've learned about it so much in the Bible and in this book, Science and Health, this book I've been telling you about. If you don't have a copy, please get yourself a copy on the way out. I see a bunch on a table out there. As you read through this book, you'll find a lot of ideas that will build on what we've been talking here about today. Probably you'll get to a point where you'll come across what really is the best known sentence in the entire book. The best known sentence in this book, Science and Health, it's where Mary Baker Eddy says, what's right there on the wall, divine love always has met and always will meet every human need. The reason that that sentence is so famous, is so well known, is because no matter what you're praying about, no matter what the subject is, no matter what you are up against, the human need, that human need you're feeling, you know what? In every case, it's always for divine love. It's divine love that will meet every human need. You know what that feels like. You've experienced it. You've basked in the love of God. You know what it feels like to have it just fill you and overflow. What happens in that wonderful divine love? Take your eyes over to this side. Truth. One of the best known words in the books of the Bible. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Free of what? Free of real evil. Free of real lack. Free of real injustice. No. Remember, love is the basis of everything. Love is all you get. So, what the truth frees you from is just the belief, the thought that fear could be real, injustice, evil, could even be anything. No, the love that is truth does it all. Think of your consciousness, think of your thought like a big chalkboard or maybe a whiteboard, the kind you have in school. You have those smart boards. If you leave your mental chalkboard blank, if you leave your mental chalkboard blank, somebody's going to write on it. Somebody's going to write on it, and you're going to see all kinds of things that weren't written there by God, all sorts of things from the world. You might see written on your mental chalkboard sometimes, occasionally, you might see written, I am such an idiot. You might see that written on your mental chalkboard, maybe more than once. Or you might see this written on your mental chalkboard, your mental whiteboard. You might see written, everyone else is such an idiot. You might see that. The other day I was on a plane landing, I was changing planes to Sacramento, and there was a guy next to me. He was reading a newspaper, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about this year's flu season. And you might see that written on your mental chalkboard. You might see that winter is flu season, stuff like that. There are all sorts of other things you may see written, but you know what? Anything that scares you, anything that seems to threaten you, in all cases, it reduces down to one thing, a feeling of being separated from the love of God, one way or another. That's why it is so important to be intentional about feeling God's love. Now, let's take that first one. I am such an idiot. If that's written on your mental chalkboard, it might have been written there for years. All right, if you find something like that written there, remember, God didn't write it. It's just static from the world. It's just what the world thinks. You find yourself actually thinking you believe it. If you find that there, you need to have a good eraser. You need to be able to erase that line And you actually each own the best eraser known to man. And that is the love of God. As soon as you do what we were saying a few minutes ago, just stop and let God love you. Not just say the words, but actually feel it. The moment you feel the love of God, your mental chalkboard is clean. Then you allow God to write on it. You know what that's like. Might start the same way, I am such and, but let God finish the sentence. Might be something very, very good. Again, when the love of God is behind a truth given to you, that love of God gives it incredible authority. And so practice this, exercise it. What about that other one I mentioned? Everyone else is such an idiot. That might be written on your mental chalkboard. There might be somebody in your life you really don't like, maybe someone at work. Maybe it's someone in your distant past that you still chew over how you don't like that person. The person really did something wrong. All right, if you've got something like that on your mental chalkboard, how do you clean it off? What do you use to wash clean your mental chalkboard? What is it? Love. The love. That's right, the love of God. The love of God. Then you let God write on your thought something about that individual. It takes a lot of humility to do that. Sometimes you just got to swallow your pride and say, okay, God, love me. Let me get clean, and then you tell me about that person. When you do that, that's prayer. You might be the first individual ever to pray for that person. You know that? It's that important to do it. Try it. You know what you're going to find? Yeah, it'll help that other person. It will. But watch how much it helps you. Oh, just do it. Do it on the way home today. How about that last one I mentioned? That the winter is flu season. That one. Let me tell you how that was written on your mental chalkboards. It's a funny thing. Maybe some of you have heard this before. It actually started in Southern Europe. In Southern Europe, about 400 years ago. The people in Southern Europe had been invaded several times from people in the east and north, and they were very suspicious of people from away. Now, many of you probably have been to Europe. In the winter in Europe, occasionally, there can be a very cold wind that blows from north to south. The people in Southern Europe, they would feel that cold wind. And being so suspicious of the people in the north, actually, it turned to a superstition. They thought that that cold wind was an evil influence that was coming from the people in the north. And that evil influence was there to make them sick. And they got sick. Now, those people in Southern Europe, they got in boats and came all the way across the ocean around the Horn right here to California. And that's why we see written on our mental chalkboards that the winter is flu season. It's only something that has been written on our boards for about 400 years. That whole idea is a very short idea. Now, I remember when we used to live in up north in the San Francisco Bay Area. We lived there for a while. And we'd come down here, visit friends, go to the beach. And in January, you know how there are days it can be real hot right there on the beach. And maybe you've seen this. You ever see somebody there on the beach in January on a hot day, sitting on her towel or his towel, and maybe with another group, and they're fighting over the suntan lotion and the Kleenex because they have the flu. They have to. It's winter. And they're required to be sick. That evil influence. You know, the word influenza or flu, that's what it comes from, that evil influence that comes from up north. All right, what if you have that right up there on your mental chalkboard? What do you do? All right, well, you know what to do. You got to first wash it off. You can't just write over the top of it. What do you do to clean your mental whiteboard like that? What do? You won't forget this. Remember the healing power of truth and love. So you let the love of God wash you clean. Then, in that holy love, let God tell you what season it really is. Now, let me ask you this. When I lived here in California, I think there were 22 million people here. How many people live here now? Anybody know? 28 million? 38 million. Don't come to New Mexico. All right, 38 million people. Let me ask you this. A large percentage of that 38 million have written on their mental chalkboards that the winter is flu season. Many of them do. If you turn to God, allow God to wash you clean and tell you what season it really is, that's just one chalkboard, yours, that has changed. 38 million to 1. That doesn't seem like very good odds. Does it really matter if you pray in this manner? Yes, it does. Have very many of you here ever heard that saying, that one with God is a majority? You ever hear that before? I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that even slightly. No. Because God is the only power, the only authority, the only thing present. One with God isn't just a majority. One with God, it's a monopoly. And so when you agree with God, when you allow the intelligence, the truth to touch you and change your thought, you have the authority of God behind it. It doesn't matter how other people think. See, all that's behind that is just human fear and human belief. The truth that is God has all the authority. Jesus made a career of praying this way. He didn't care what anybody thought. He didn't care what anyone was afraid of. No, Bible describes, and he says it, that he was about his Father's business. Not even his own business. He was about his Father's business. And you know what that's like. To allow God to love you and tell you the truth. That's the Father's business in regard to you. That's what connects prayer with healing, and it's just so wonderful. Now, I think we've come a ways in answering that question. What is it that connects prayer with healing? It's beautiful how it just takes a moment for the love of God to touch you like that. Let me ask you, as I have been describing that little moment, when you're praying, you might have been up against it like you'd never been before, and then you pray and you learn something from God. God tells you something that changes everything. Does that sound kind of familiar? Anybody here in the room have an experience like that, where you think this is it, and then in that toughest time, the love of God touches your life and gives you a perspective, even if it just takes a moment, but it changes everything. That's something that should be on the leading news stations every night. There's just one God, one mind, looking at us all, loving us all. You can't disappoint that God. You can't impress it either. You just express it. I love that. When the love of God touches your thought, it feels so good to commit to it. Let it become what you think. Now it's your permanent outlook. There's a place in the Bible that I think about just about every day, and I want you to think about it too. It's simple. It says, keep yourselves in the love of God. Keep yourselves in the love of God. Boy, that means a lot more to you now, doesn't it, than it did before this lecture. Keep yourselves in the love of God. Don't just do this occasionally. In the weeks to come, continue to be intentional about letting God love you. Will you do that? You promise? You think about Jesus. I mentioned how when he was being baptized, he heard God say, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." Well, right after his crucifixion, he met with his disciples. Now, these were his friends. These were people he knew very well. And that last meeting he had with them, it's very significant to our work here today. These were his buddies, but he didn't talk with them about the crucifixion and how hard it was or what he was doing there in the tomb for those 3 days. All he talks about, you read about it in the Bible, all he talks about is the love of God. That's all he talks about. One way or another, for those last That last chapter in the New Testament is just about Jesus talking about the love of God. I read it the other day and it struck me. You know, for him to talk about that love, he must have been drawing on the love of God all through that crucifixion. That might have been the hardest thing he ever had to do. In that tough time, he turned to the love of God. And he knows he was our example. So, in the hardest thing you may ever have to face, you too, like Jesus, can turn to the love of God. Go on the strength of it, all the way through the hardest things. Keep yourselves in the love of God. I know you will. You ever make a big pot of soup? Picture it there boiling on the stove. If you then took a large sprig of rosemary and put it in the soup, and you tasted it right then, it wouldn't taste very different. But after that rosemary cooked for a while in the soup, then you'd be able to taste it. The love of God is like that too. Let it cook in you. Let it cook in you for a while, a few days. By the end of the week, you'll taste very different. You'll see. Do that. Keep yourself in the love of God. I'm not going to let this go. Maybe some of you here in the room play a musical instrument. Maybe you play a piano or guitar, or violin, something like that. Try this. It's another way to keep yourselves in the love of God. Instead of thinking of an instrument like a piano or a guitar or a violin, think of your instrument as actually your entire day. That's your whole instrument. The day is your instrument, and at any point on your day, on your instrument, you can play a concert of God's love. See, you're made to show forth the love of God, just as you're made to feel it, to receive it, to be transparent to God's love, even in the littlest things. That's such a joy. There's such substance to it. In the little interactions you have with other people, let them feel the love of God. Remember that woman I talked about at the very beginning? Remember how she cried, "Why didn't I know you before? Why didn't I know you always?" You don't have to do that. You know the love of God. Now, we're finishing up here. You remember? Basic to our work together. First in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. I know each one of you here, you're not just going to do the love part and leave out the truth, or just do the truth, just the letter, and leave out the spirit. No, you're going to do both, the healing power of truth and love, and you know how to do it because you've already experienced it. Instead of finishing on some big old cymbal crashing end, let's do this. You know what to do. We know how to connect prayer with healing. We know exactly how to work it now. We know what to do. First in the list of Christian duties, Jesus taught his followers the healing power of truth and love. Let's get up from here. We're done. Let's go out and do our duty. You want to? All right, I'll do it with you too. Thank you.